This war is all about control of the holy mountain. We can divide this long war between the fallen gods, fallen angels if you prefer, and Yahweh, the God of the Bible, in 7 phases, each one defined by a particular mountain. Mountain number 1 of the long war between the fallen gods and the God of the Bible is Eden. This is the original holy mountain. Now, of course, usually when we hear Eden, it's usually preceded by the Garden of, which is correct. Garden of Eden was a garden, but it was also a garden on a mountain. Ezekiel 28. As God is chastising the king of Tyre, but also the divine rebel in Eden. Scholars believe this, of course, is referring to the serpent in the garden. You were in Eden, the garden of God, and when you skip down, I placed you, you were on the holy mountain of God. Eden was a well-watered garden on a mountain. Now note, this is where something called the divine council meant. And we'll find in the Bible here just shortly where you see the term divine council. But you see it referenced in Ezekiel 28. The seat of the gods. Again, small g gods. These are created beings, not to be confused with the pantheon. But that's where the gods met. And humanity was there too. Adam and Eve were there in the garden with these divine beings created by God who served as his supernatural task force in a sense. This is also where the enemy applied or employed the very first PSYOP in history, which is, ye shall be as gods. Unfortunately, most of the PSYOPs throughout history employed by our supernatural enemy basically boil down to that, ye shall be as gods. Because it keeps working. People keep falling for it. Well, Adam and Eve fell for it. Did they become as gods? No. They got kicked out of the garden, off the mountain, and out of the divine council. Now, here's some of the stuff I had to cut out, which I think is pretty cool. Who was the serpent in the garden? Most of us assume that it was Satan, but the Bible doesn't actually say that. He's not mentioned in the book of Genesis. In fact, Satan in the Old Testament wasn't even a personal name. If you read the Hebrew, it's Ha-Satan, the Satan. It's a job description, the accuser, like the prosecuting attorney. Now, there are some guys who'll point to this and say, so we can't call him Satan because that's not his name. Yeah, okay, but Jesus used Satan as a personal name, so I assume he knew what he was talking about. But in the Old Testament, this was how the Hebrew prophets viewed the accuser, the Satan. The adversary in the garden, however, is not called Ha-Satan, it's Ha-Nachash. Nachash is a word translated as serpent. But it's based on a Hebrew word, an adjective, that means bright or shining, brazen, like polished brass. The noun, Nachash, can mean snake, but it also can mean one who practices divination, witchcraft. Okay? Now, in Hebrew, and I'm not a Hebrew scholar, I just hang out with guys who are, tell me that it's not uncommon for a Hebrew adjective to be converted into a noun. The official scholarly term is substantivized. So if that is what's happening here, where Nachash, the adjective, is being used as a noun, what you've got is a word that essentially means shining one. Shining one. Which is consistent with the descriptions that we see of the Satan elsewhere in the Old Testament. For example, Isaiah 14, how thou art fallen, Lucifer, that passage. The translation that Jerome used when he translated the Hebrew into Latin, the Hebrew was Helel ben Shakar, meaning shining one, son of the dawn. So we've got a shining entity in the garden, not a talking snake, but perhaps perhaps of serpentine appearance. In Daniel chapter 10, Daniel was visited by a supernatural being, an angel. And that's what we're talking about here. An angel whose body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, like the Nachash. Now look at this. When the Israelites, following Moses out of Egypt, started complaining about their time in the desert, God sent entities to bite them. We're told they were fiery serpents, but the Hebrew, seraph, the root word is seraphim, Nachash, seraph, Nachash, used interchangeably by Moses. Now, seraph, like I said, the root word of seraphim, which roughly means burning ones, burning ones. In the book of Deuteronomy 8:15, Moses praises Yahweh for bringing the Israelites through the desert with its scorpions, its drought, and its fiery serpents. It's seraph, Nachash. Isaiah, the prophet, mentions fiery flying serpents twice in his book. And in the famous throne room vision, where Isaiah says, "Here I am, Lord, send me," and a seraph comes, takes a coal, touches it to his lips. The seraphim in the throne room with God. So, when you put all this evidence together, and I know this is a little weird and speculative, but again, this is the kind of thing I think is really cool. It's in the Bible. What you get is not a talking snake at all, but you get a divine, supernatural entity, a burning entity perhaps, with glowing appearance, perhaps of serpentine appearance, Nachash meaning snake or serpent. Now, I bring this up now to plant a seed for later, so file a mental bookmark there. The main takeaway, though, of all of this is that Eden was a garden on God's holy mountain where Adam and Eve walked in the seat of the gods with God Yahweh, but also the small g, if you want to call them angels, that's fine. The Bible refers to them as gods, and we'll see later in the Bible where God calls them gods. So I'm in pretty sound footing on that. But the whole point, they got kicked out of the council, kicked off the mountain, and the long war, all about whether or not humanity gets restored to that place in the divine council with God on his holy mountain.